Welcome to the Mind Solution Podcast with Sara Maude. The Mind Solution Podcast is for leaders like you who are passionate about well-being in the workplace because you understand that a strong, resilient and happy workforce is the key to your organisation's success. The Mind Solution Podcast is here to help you. So join us every week where we'll share with you powerful insights, strategies and know-how to ensure that your people and your organisation are truly thriving from the inside out. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mind Solution Podcast, or you might also be watching this on video. And if you are, you will put names to faces. And a face that I'm absolutely delighted to be sat in front of virtually is the face of Dominic Scaffidi. Now, Dominic, I think, has had a really interesting career because Dominic can correct me if I've got any of this wrong, but Dominic started his journey into the corporate world working in sales for Procter & Gamble before taking perhaps what I would consider an unlikely turn into the world of human resources, where he worked his way up the HR career ladder, and his HR career, as he knew it, finished as VP of one of Canada's largest retail organizations, Loblaw. Have I pronounced that one correctly?
Yeah, it's Loblaw Companies Limited. Yes, the large grocery retailer here. And they're the largest. Yes.
Huge. Absolutely huge. And Dominic is now a master coach working with organizations and their leadership team, and somebody who I see is bringing spirituality into business, although, as we said, that might not be his exact marketing slogan, but it's something that I absolutely see you doing, Dominic. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I really love this topic. Because it touches at one of the most essential and important parts of all of us. It's all human beings, right? So our true nature, it's who we really are. You can't leave that part out of it. And when it comes to organizations and our performance and our ability to do things, to show up, to be at our best, for the organization to deliver results and all of that, it's silly not to have a conversation that includes that particular aspect of everyone in the organization. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as we were talking just before we hit the record button, Dominic and I have both had very corporate careers working for quite corporate organizations, both with a background about human resources. And if you told me 15 years ago I would be sat here talking about spirituality in business, I probably would have looked at you kind of thinking, really? I'm not sure. But I'm curious to know from your perspective, Dominic, how do you define, I know you touched on it a little bit there, but how do you define spirituality in the context of business?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. It's not so foreign. So the language doesn't get used very much when it comes to organizations and, this leadership development and all that. So really that language of spirituality does not get used much. But when you look at what we're talking about, it's all over business. It's like everywhere, right? They talk about these invisible things, right? And they have these meetings and they talk about them like these market forces that are happening. They talk about things like brand and our brand. We need to discover and articulate the essence of our brand. What is that, you say? What is that? It's the feeling. When people walk into the Starbucks, there is a feeling, and it is a different feeling that is anywhere else. What are you talking about? It's invisible. It's this invisible, mysterious thing. So organizations and people are talking about this all the time, and they never call it spiritual. They never use that label for it. So they just speak energies and essence and a feeling that's going on. In HR, we were interested in engagement. We want employee engagement. We want satisfaction, right? And it's kind of like, well, what is that? Like, what is that? Is that how you pay them? Well, no, it's not about that. I mean, everybody pays people. It's that they come to work and they're engaged. But everybody comes to work. What do you mean engaged, right? Well, they're here, but they're really, well, they're all here. I see them, right? What are you talking about? And what they were talking about is something invisible. It's not quite apparent, but it's something more. Well, there's two people there. They look to me to be showing up at work, and both are doing their work. They're both at their desk for the same length of time. Yeah, but one of them is highly engaged and the other one isn't. What are you talking about? So organizations already know, and they just don't call it spiritual, but they're interested in it, and boy, are they seeking it, and boy, are they trying to figure out how to bring more of it out in the workplace. And they just don't like that word.
Yeah. And I love what you just said. I absolutely love it, because you're so right. You know, if I think about from my HR days or working with organizations as we do, I hear words like connection. We've got to create a connection with our customers or a connection with our people. You know, it's like we talk about culture, and it's like the vibe around
yes, right.
And, you know, winning hearts and minds. And it's like, right. Okay, this is interesting. Or self-awareness, creating conscious leaders. But yeah, there isn't that connection between spirituality and the language that they're actually using. So it's why I'm so excited to be having this conversation, to shine a light on that.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, it feels like the conversation about spirituality in business is so needed. And as you say, they are kind of having these conversations. They're maybe not joining the dots, but I'd love to get your take, Dominic, on why you feel now is the time more than ever that we need to start talking about spirituality in business.
Yeah, it was always the time, right? So it was always the time, because this is the greatest part, the biggest, largest part of every human being in the organization is this, right? In other words, a physical body shows up to the office every day, right? That's useful, right? Now you get a physical body in there, right? And then there's also a psychological being that shows up to the office as well. So that physical body happens to have all this thinking and you could say certain patterns of thought and all of that. And by the way, there's such a relationship, because that thinking seems to be impacting the way that they behave around here, right? So it seems to be that what they're thinking is impacting the way they're behaving and how they're dealing with our customers. So the businesses would always see, you know, you've got this physical showing up, and then you've got the psychology, and that sometimes that will give us a problem. So we're going to need to change their minds. We're going to need to do some stuff. But what's missed in all of that is that none of this operates without an energy. None of it is actually operating, because what you get if you remove the energy from it is what you're left with is a dead body without any thinking. That's what you're left with, right? So You get a body walking into the office and they're thinking, right? And then they're either effective or ineffective. They're either creating conflict or they're creating incredible, innovative ideas. And here we are as a business and as an organization, and we've left out the conversation that is most important about what they're bringing. Because the greatest part of them is this energy and this intelligence that exists beyond where their experience is, beyond everything they know that they're bringing you, because they bring you experience and knowledge. We train them in knowledge because we don't like their thinking, so we give them new thinking, right? We try to do all these things, but meanwhile, we're missing the fact that they have a wisdom. They have an energy and an connected to an infinite intelligence, a wisdom, and we all have this. And if you could tap that and at least pay a little bit of attention to it, like pay a little bit of attention to it, because would make a big difference, right? Then potentially there's a real sort of tapping into a potential, a possibility, which is in truth is the source of all your innovation, all of what's new, all of the extraordinary performance and handling of customer issues in a way that, was innovative and creative and different. Where did that come from? It was from somewhere beyond what they already knew, what was, already there. They tapped into something new, something different. And that, if you can help employees with that, as well as create an organization that is aware of it, consciously aware of it and its importance, that's huge for an organization.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating, isn't it, that when it comes to, say, leadership training, for example, so much time and energy and money is invested in leadership training that focuses so much on behavior, trying to create great leadership. And yet, if leaders don't really understand what's creating their experience, that focusing on behaviors like focusing on the tip of the iceberg and it's missing out what's really creating that behavior, then organizations are just throwing money at something that only really gives them incremental results, because they leave the leadership course and they're like, yeah, I got some good tips, but then they just fall back into these default patterns. And I'd love to know, from the work that you're doing with leadership teams, what you observe, what results you're getting, what results the leadership team, the organizations are getting from sharing this missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle.
My way of working in organizations is as a coach. I'm a professional coach. I'm a master certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. So I'm strongly grounded in the distinction that is coaching. And that's by choice. By choice, I'm grounded in the distinction that is coaching. So all of my work in organizations is as a coach. So I'm not in an organization to share things, and I'm not in an organization to, advise them on things. The reason I've chosen coaching as a profession is it became clear to me that words don't teach. Words don't teach. And so only your own life experience can teach you anything. Only what your life proves to you, what your life is showing you. So if anything we're talking about is actually true, then we don't need to teach it. We simply need to engage with it when we are engaged with every bit of work we're doing with organizations. If it's true, it's there, whether they are aware of it or not. And so we can simply begin engaging with what we know is there and is present. Just because an organization or a leader says, oh yeah, we don't want to talk about that stuff, or they may be completely blind to it being there. Well, I don't have to be blind when someone is blind. I can see what I see anyway, and I can begin engaging with it. And from my engagement with it, they begin to see it as well. So practical. Well, first of all, it's so funny because in organizations, once they run out of they try everything first, right? So leadership development, we know what they need, and what they need, leadership development, they need to be more strategic. They need to be more servant leadership. That's what they need. Like, so all this stuff. Well, what does that mean? Well, let's look for a book or something. So somebody wrote something, like, let's get that. Okay, good. Someone actually figured this out, so we can now train it, right? But so it's now being trained at the physical, which is a behavioral level, right? So we want their bodies in here in the office, and we want the bodies moving in a particular way, right? Oh my God, this is going to be really hard if we're going to try and do this, right? This is what's ridiculous about the approach, right? So we want behaviors. So by the way, let's study competencies, because competencies are behaviors that we can see these leaders doing. Like, we want leaders who speak last. We want leaders who do not interrupt in the meeting, and what they do is they listen, and they listen completely, and then they speak last. So can we get these bodies into these meetings and then get them to do what we say? And we know, we've studied it, and these competencies are what leadership competencies are. So see how ridiculous it sounds when you look at what we're actually trying to do, what people are actually.
And we're going to measure you on these competencies.
Yes.
Your pay increase is going to depend on you behaving
totally.
in a particular way. Oh yeah.
I mean, ideally, we'd have cameras in the meeting room, and with AI now, we could tell whether you spoke last or whether you spoke first, and then we could measure how often you're doing this. And then, so anyway, to get past that, then they'll often talk, no, it's the thinking we need. We need strategic thinking. We need this other thing. We need them to be, more to develop trust. Well, how do you do that? Well, there's a 5-step process. We want them to develop trust. First, you connect with the person, ask them something personal, and then, act interested in it. And then, so we train in all kinds of ways, right? So we need to get them to think in a particular way so that we can. And so that whole thing, by the way, organizations get so to the end of the line on all that attempt, because what's missing is what's real. So then they use other language. A lot of my coaching, when it comes to individuals, they go, they need leadership presence. That's the coaching. What the coaching needs to be about is leadership presence, because they just ran out of everything in the competency.
They ran out of buzzwords.
They ran out. Like they knew. They tried already to give the behavior changes, and then they tried already to do the proper ways of thinking, right? Those got the thinking and behaving, and the person is still ineffective, and no one listened to them, and they have zero influence in the organization. And now they don't know what it is. And so what's missing is presence. So can you coach on leadership presence? Now you can see how they're starting to touch on the spiritual nature of this human being, right? So in coaching, it shows up in some of that kind of thing. When I work with teams, when I work with teams, you walk into the room and you say, have you ever walked into your team meetings and felt dread? Have you ever walked into the team? Have you ever sensed in the middle of your team meeting, as the team meeting has happened, have you ever felt like, uh-oh, this isn't going to go well? Right? Like, what is that? Are you psychic? Are you psychic? No, you're not psychic. There is an energy in this room. Are you paying any attention to it? There's an energy in this room. You're only paying attention to the speaking that's going on. You're only paying attention to who's sitting in the room, but you're not noticing something else is in this room. And what that is something that seems to be connecting these people. It's the most important thing that's going on. And if you were to pay attention to it, you would know that you can shut down this meeting right now because nothing productive will come of it. Or you can do something about the energy in this room, because it is possible to do something about the energy in this room. And suddenly you can make the next 2 hours highly productive. Anyone interested in that? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Right? Everyone knows what I'm talking about. This is not a mystery to anyone. They just don't know where to look, but they know that it's there. They don't know where to look because what we're pointing to is not physically visible. It's not, you can't hear it. You can't physically see it in the behaviors, although it manifests in every behavior and the words out of everyone's mouth. So it is expressing physically, visibly, which certainly gets your attention. But the part that's actually operating all of this in the background is something invisible and no one is noticing. But when you notice that and you actually can do something about it, that's very useful. That does make a big difference.
And it kind of makes me think about where organizations are on what seems like they're always trying to look at things like team dynamics, foster greater relationships, create more harmony in the workplace. I see so many courses for, having difficult conversations or, challenging conversations. And I'm like, well, again, if we don't really understand where that conflict, what's creating our experiences, then it's very natural that we're going to look at our colleague and go, you are doing my head in. You have made me feel angry. You are frustrating me. You are annoying me. And so again, all of these attempts to try and create greater cohesion. Oh, we'll send them on a team building day. We'll send them on an assault course. We'll get them to wrap their arms around each other and, sing some songs, and they're all going to come suddenly back and be able to work together really well. And there's £10,000 for the day. But again, it's like, if people aren't understanding what's really creating their experience as we understand it, that spiritual aspect, that energetic aspect, then it's pretty fair to say that any team building stuff is just like throwing jelly against the wall and hoping that it sticks. But what are your thoughts around that?
That's probably how all that we point to gets a bad rap, because the attempts at it, which organizations have tried desperately, right? The attempts at it have not literally developed a deeper understanding within the organization and within the leaders and individuals in the organization of who they really are, of all that they are, that they bring to work every day, and how that is a factor in how they come to work every day and how they engage every day. So a team building event, which is working to somehow, it's so interesting because they talk, oh, you're talking woo-woo stuff, or you're talking, right? But it's so funny because somehow some team building event where we climb ropes somehow magically creates connection and relationship. And the problem is that sometimes it does. So sometimes it does. Oh, now I trust Mary more than I ever trusted her before. Oh, how did that happen? Well, we did a ropes climbing thing with the team, and now I feel more bonded and whatever. Oh, yeah. And you're no closer to a real understanding of what that connection and trust actually is. And so now you're delusional because you think it's ropes courses. Could you imagine taking all these teams out? Could you imagine the risk, the liability risk? Let's take them all out. Let's put them on canoes, right? Because that will create the bonding and the team dynamics. It's like it can randomly, and also some organizations have had enough experience with that to realize, but it's not sustainable. It doesn't actually work. Many of them revert back to where they've always been. And that's, yes, because there's no deeper understanding in anyone. It was accidental. They did something, they ended up in connection. They could see the power of this. They could see what happens when trust is there, but none of them know how to access it because it was not looked at explicitly. It was never discerned what actually happened. And so if it's not discerned, you don't have any access to it, and neither do your leaders. And so once they leave this team and go to another team, the best they can do is another canoe trip. What else are they going to do? And they know that worked, and they certainly don't know.
Mary overboard because she's annoyed you.
So this is why what we're doing is important. But the thing about that is this is the work of us as coaches and people who are in support of these organizations and these leaders. So the most important thing is we have to see it, which means, unfortunately, you got to do it yourself. Like, you got to do your own work. You got to do your own introspection, because unless you have the seeing and the understanding of who you are, then you can't see that. You can't see it in anybody else. Once you realize who you are, once you see all that you are, you now have an understanding of who we all are. That's what's so powerful. And that's the same thing that happens with leaders in the organization. What's the value of this direction? Is as they come to understand more of who they really are, as they come to see all that they really are, they personally become far more effective in their results, outcomes, all of that. But the big bonus is, in their understanding of who they really are, they come to realize who everyone in the organization really is, from the new starting person at the level of the organization that is the simplest task, all the way up to the most senior executive with the greatest responsibility. The leaders can now know who everyone is. So who everyone is at core, and what is true for every human being in that organization. If you have an organization of human beings, to understand something about what a human being is at core could be useful. could be useful in your ability to organize and to enroll and to align human beings into greater purposes, right? It could be useful, right? But you must understand that for yourself, because it is not true of them and not of you. And you don't need to worry about them. Just look at you. As you come to realize it for yourself, you will know what is true for every human being on the planet. One of the side benefits, by the way, of some of this work in organizations is the amount, it's the most satisfying part. Okay, first of all, to stay in business, I have to deliver real results. So these leaders have to actually increase sales. They actually have to do stuff. Otherwise, I'd be out of business, right? But what's really satisfying, I was coaching this leader. It was a CFO. The problem is so very effective, huge contribution to the organization, and so much damage everywhere he went. Just like a bomb going off everywhere, right? Every meeting was an explosion. There's no functions enjoyed any sort of interaction with them. All the functions were kind of like, if you could avoid finance, just do it. If you can figure out a way around them, that's what you need to do. So people were using their common sense, right? Say I'm coaching them and we're talking about, we're not that far in. We're only a month or 6 weeks in. And it shows up and we're like, okay, so what are we talking about? He goes, well, I've got this meeting coming up. It's with, the senior team and whatever. I go, great. Well, let's talk about that. Well, I already know how it's going to go. Right. This is it. Right. And this is the point of our coaching, right? Was about this. Well, I already know how it's going to go. I have this initiative which is going to save our company a ton of money, and they're all against it. And I already know, I see it in the emails, and so I'm ready to get it right. We get in, so we do some coaching around this, right? 2 weeks later, the next session, and the way I typically start sessions is I'll say, hey, so any insights, learning, anything, any highlights since the last time we spoke, and then we look at what we want to talk about. So he shows up after that kind of a session 2 weeks later. So any insights, highlights, anything that's happened since the last? He went quiet. And he says, I got to tell you, I had the most incredible conversation with my 12-year-old son. I was like, not expecting this. I was like, not expecting this. And we don't need doesn't matter the rest. But the point being here, there was something in the conversation. His behavior with these teams, his behavior at work is no different than his behavior. This is what a human being does. A human being shows up at work, but whatever you see them doing at work, if there's an issue or a challenge for them, it's everywhere in their life. When I'm coaching a human being. So what I know is that this will impact their entire life, even if we don't talk about their entire life. And so when I hear that story, the part that it says to me is that worked. So then that coaching actually did work. This person saw something for themselves. And when I hear that, they won't have a problem at work, because whatever they just saw that allowed that conversation with their 12-year-old son that they hadn't been having before, that skill and ability, if you want to call it that, is now available at work. And so notice there's the magic of this. There was no time spent on developing this person's competencies. we did not ever have a conversation about active listening and the 3 levels of active listening and how you need to do that. We didn't have a conversation about that. We didn't have any conversation about how you speak in a way that blah, blah, blah. What a waste of time and money that organizations are spending on all of that stuff. And it makes no difference.
You know, I love what you said, because it reminds me of a training contract that we did a couple of years ago now with an organization called Sophology, who you can maybe guess by the title what they sell: things to sit on, sofas. Big retail organization in the UK, and we put about 200 of their managers through a management mental health training program. We did cover listening, but it was from the angle of what we're talking about. It was talking about connection. It was talking about, really, really listening and listening well. And what blew me away was kind of something similar to what you're describing. Is it was over 3 modules. So like week 1, we delivered module 1, and week 2, module 2, and they went off. And we also did some coaching skills training with them, and they went off. And the amount that came back and said exactly that, I had an amazing conversation with my child. I really listened to my child. I had a very different experience with my child. We had them like practically saving relationships. Like one guy I remember kind of, he asked his wife, how are you? How are you really doing? And I think she looked at him as if to say, you've never asked me this question. But they were just blown away by the outcome that they were experiencing by taking this, as you said, into all areas. And so it's such a beautiful thing that when we're helping people to understand our true nature and connection, it's like dropping a pebble into a pond. It just creates a ripple effect.
Yeah. Wow.
And the other thing that strikes me, and I know that you'll understand both as a coach and as your previous experience in the world of HR, is something which I've seen organizations really put a spotlight on. I would say, from my perspective, the last 5 to 10 years, but I think that the whole COVID lockdown really put it under the spotlight, and that was mental health in the workplace.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm just so passionate about talking about spirituality in business now is it's everything that we've talked about. It's kind of like trying to address things the wrong way round. So it's like, okay, mental health, right? We've got this problem in the organization. We've got people that are burnt out, anxious, they're depressed, they're stressed, they're overwhelmed. Okay, so we're going to put mental health first aiders in. Like, that's going to help solve the problem. Or we're going to do mental health awareness training. And not suggesting that any of those things are bad things, but again, what strikes me is if we aren't helping people to understand their true nature, if we're not helping people to understand what's creating their experience, then we're trying to solve the problem from the level of the problem instead of that light on what's going to create the kind of transformation that's needed here. What are your thoughts?
Well, what you just said so important, because see, where we're pointing is it's hard it's hard to get the part that we're pointing to a non-doing ultimately, because there's enough today of an understanding of certain things. Like, I know that even in organizations, they speak about things like agility and agile. Like there's even agile all over in
I don't
software and
actually
all.
know what that means, agile working.
Right. It's but see, that's an approaching. It's kind of an approaching what we know. It almost trusts in an agility and flexibility and self-regulation of an organization that so this is where there's an understanding that something is there, right? And what we're pointing to is trusting it. It's like a pointing to trusting that there's something working in the background, and it's highly intelligent. It's an infinite intelligence, and it's guiding, and it is inspiring. It is inspiring movement and action in every person, and ultimately in organizations too. And our trouble is that we're pointing to how you best align with that, how you best almost let go into that is more of a non-doing than a doing. So take mental health, for example. If this is true, we don't need to say whether it is or isn't. But if the metaphor of the mind is one of, there have been different metaphors used, but water with lots of sand or dirt, right, put in it, and every sand pebble or whatever, what do you call that? Grain. Every grain of sand being a thought, right? That's a thought. So those are all the thoughts in your mind, and that mind being some water. Well, if the mind were very muddy and unclear, your ability to do anything, to know how to respond to this customer, to know what you're doing because you're about to miss a deadline. So what should you do now? If you're working with a mind which is muddy, unclear, and you can't see anything, your ideas suck. Your impulse of what to do with this customer who has this challenge, or your coworker who you have a conflict with, the ideas that you have are terrible because your mind is cloudy. Mental health, right, when you look at that, is also affected in a similar way. Cloudy, lots of thinking. And what is the mental health challenge anyway? Well, I have a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of stress at work. I have, right? And that those things are my way of thinking, which really makes my mind not my friend. So then we say, well, we need to help people with mental health. We need to do something about that. So the ideal thing we could do, if we really were magic, we could take people with very cloudy minds. And I don't care what the clouds are. It could be like stress. It could be anxiety. It could be like an insecurity. And all of this is like creating all kinds of havoc in the workplace. But let's forget all that. The point is they're all cloudy. And so if we could give them mental health training, and it was really good, right? If we ever could deliver a clear mind, wow, we could get paid a lot of money, because the organization would say, you just took a whole bunch of employees who had these tension and stress and all that, and then you deliver the clear mind where they can think clearly with access to real intelligence. How? right? If we could do it, would be amazing. And here's the thing, if you stuck with the metaphor, the way we would do it would be by showing everyone that the way to get to that kind of clear state of mind is literally from not doing anything. And they won't buy that. They certainly won't pay for that. No one will pay.
Tools. We need tools. We need techniques.
We need tools. We've got to give them. In other words, we need more grains of sand. Do you guys, because our employees don't have enough grains of sand in their cloudy minds. And so we hear you're a consultant and we hear you're an expert. Have you got more grains of sand that we can feed and pour into the minds of our employees so that we can cloudy them up a little more? So see, they're never going to buy what we're talking about, which is what we're talking about is to say, we're going to help people understand the way the mind works. And we're going to help them to understand that when there's tension and stress and insecurity, that what there is a muddy and a cloudy mind. And that if we can show them the nature of mind, and the nature of mind is to clear itself when you don't disturb it. The nature of mind is it becomes clear. Everything settles when you don't disturb it. So everything you're teaching employees to do is disturbing it. It is a disturbance. It is a further grain of sand with more movement in it. You're not helping. What's really required is an understanding of mind and a true understanding of what our mind is and what the nature of our mind is. From that understanding, you do not need to teach employees what to do. Once they understand how that works, they can allow it to clear, or they can know when it's muddy and they don't do stupid things. So once they know that it's muddy, they also know that they're impaired, let's say. And so you don't speak up in a meeting and you don't say things in a meeting from a muddy mind, because that causes all kinds of damage and it causes all kinds of repercussions. And so things like that are kind of like where the direction that we would go in working with an organization. Yeah.
It reminds me of the term that I've heard Jamie Smart use on more than one occasion, which is subtractive psychology.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Brilliant.
It's
brilliant.
And it's fair to say that when I first started working with organizations, 12 years ago, I was giving them more grains of sand. I'm like, okay, you want tools, you want techniques? I got them coming out my ears. I'm going to teach you how to do this. And it just added to that overflowing to-do list in people's minds of, okay, well, I've got to drink water. And I've got to, okay, I know I've got this meeting, but apparently I'm supposed to take an Ultra D and dip. I've got to do that every 90 minutes. Oh God. And yeah, it just created more and more, as you said, grains of sand. But when we're teaching people how to take things off the mind, and that actually, as you said, that when we fall back into that present moment, we don't need to be doing all these things. Yes, it's helpful to drink water. Please do that. And yes, it's helpful. Right. But it's interesting what you say, actually, because an organization that we've been working with for the last 12 months, and we're going to continue to work with for the next 12 months, is the Department of Corrections in Wisconsin. And so we've been working with employees there, running a session with them every single month. And whilst we've given each session, a title, a topic, the thread, the consistent message is everything that we've talked about today, that whole understanding of the nature of thought and what's creating our experience. And it's just been, for me, it's whilst I'm not going out there going, we're teaching you about spirituality and business, although I do talk a lot about energy and creation and things like that, it's been wonderful to see the feedback come back every month, because the message is consistent, and we know that we need to hear something more than once sometimes for us to have that insight, that people are like, oh, okay, they're learning to calm down that muddy mind in the absence of all of these tools. Like, we've had feedback of people that are saying, my anxiety is like literally halved, or it's disappeared.
Right.
Just from understanding that.
You take something like that. If you understood, let's use that, if we stay with the metaphor, right? And you understand that there is not one grain of sand that moves. Not one grain of sand will move in that muddy water without your attention to it. Just that level of understanding would be so powerful. Oh, and Sarah, sorry, I think our recording is, can you still see? Oh, there, you're back. Sorry, it went glitchy. I thought
we were just having a really connected moment there.
Sorry, I thought the recording went glitchy, but
no, I think that was profound. It was like, what you said was profound. So I thought we were just having this like moment.
Well, see, imagine employees understood that, right? Because what do I do about this muddy water, though? You haven't taught me what to do about the muddy water. Well, first of all, you got to know, when you leave it alone, it clears itself. Isn't that a relief? Isn't that a relief that your mind has such an intelligence in its nature that if you would leave it alone, it literally becomes clear. You have clarity. You can see more broadly. What a relief. You're not required for that, right? Now, okay, but what about the muddy part? Well, we do require you for that, because those grains of sand have no life. They only come alive by your attention to them. Those grains of sand will sit there dead. They live in your attention. So there's a little grain of sand. I wonder if the IT guy is going to be a jerk, like in the last meeting, right? Well, there's a thought. Why don't you think about that thought a little bit more on your way into the meeting? Why don't you think about that thought a little bit more? Because here's what's going to happen as you think that thought. As you think that thought, that grain of sand will come alive in your mind and call on its friends. So as it comes alive, it will call on its friends. It will call up more thoughts. The thoughts of what he did then. By the way, it's not just him. There's other people that are as big a jerk as this guy is. And some of them are over there in finance too. And they've got it in for you, right? And so as you give attention to that thought, more of those thoughts in the grain of sand will come in. And you don't even know you're doing this. You don't even know you're doing this. You're not even aware. But here's the thing, that as that's happening, you can feel it. You cannot think anything and not feel it. So as it's happening, you will feel it. That's the energy part. You will feel everything that you are thinking, but you don't realize that you are doing it. So all you realize is, I don't have a good feeling about this. I don't have a good feeling about this. I don't think this meeting's going to go very well. And I'm going to be prepared for these guys because I'm really going to come in and go after them first before they get me, right? It's like, here's the thing. You have zero intelligence going on right now. You have zero intelligence. You have these thoughts that are not even valid in this moment. These thoughts that were about the last meeting and the one before that, and that thought that was from 20 years ago. You're walking in with all kinds of thinking, and it has no intelligence and no validity in this meeting. You are not present. You are not clear-minded, right? And you did it. You did all of it. You did it yourself, and you don't even realize you did it. And so it's so blinding. You're in the middle of it, and you think it's them. You actually think it's them. And that's what you get in organizations, that sort of thing, right? Without that understanding. And if people understood that, there's no way they would do something like that intentionally. They'd be more intelligent.
Absolutely. And it's interesting what you said about there was that thought that they had 20 years ago, because I know from my own work of coaching in organizations that some of my clients, some of my coachees might say, I didn't really do that much. I wasn't really thinking that much before the meeting or before the one-to-one with my boss. And it's helping them to understand, well, apart from the fact that you've got about 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, which I'm kind of guessing you're not aware of every single one as it goes through, but it's what we're creating from that energy of creation is the totality of all of our experiences. It's not just about, as you said, the guy in IT, but it's where the mind's gathering data and going, yeah, but do you remember that thing, Sara, that thing that happened in the last organization? Yeah, let's add that to the pot. Let's get all of the data before you go in there. Yeah.
And that's so funny because it's all done automatically and brilliantly. It's just with perfection, right? If you think that thought has a feeling, and it will collect and bring to it more thoughts of that feeling. And so it does this automatically, which is so useful when it's useful and so destructive when it's destructive. So it's so useful when it's aligned with your intention, when it's in harmony with what the organization's wanting to do and with what you really want to do to contribute and make a difference. So useful, because that this is where it will bring you wise thinking. Lots of wisdom and new ideas will come. And so destructive when you have no idea what's going on. Yeah. Because of not understanding, not paying attention to the feeling, and not realizing that the feeling you are in has nothing to do with this meeting. The feeling you are in has nothing to do with what that person just said to you. People will argue that. You cannot feel anything about what that person just said. You cannot feel anything about what they just said in the meeting until you think about it, until you give it thought. Until you give it thought, you do not feel anything. It's just noise. It's just chatter. They just said what they said. And the moment you think about what they just said and put meaning to it, you will feel your thinking in that moment. And what you feel will either help you to respond effectively in line with your purpose, in line with what your values are, or what you feel will tell you that you are about to respond stupidly, not from intelligence. And what you are about to respond will take this negative feeling and exacerbate it and make it more and more and more, right? So this is the kind of thing. And so we're helping people through that understanding. It's like we're not trying to teach them something. What we're doing, you know what we're doing, why it's so hard, is we're trying to help them distinguish something that is there yet invisible, but it is there. The distinguishing of which is so powerful because it can help them be effective rather than ineffective. Well, what the hell are you talking about? There's something there. Well, it would be like trying to help people ride a bike. It's impossible, except there's something there that if you could distinguish it, it will make you, you will become a person who can do the impossible. What are you talking about? That thing has 2 wheels. It just like it's designed to fall down. What are you talking about? No, there's something there. It's invisible, but you can know what it is. You can distinguish it. And if you can distinguish it, I can tell you, you will be able to do the impossible. You're crazy. You're crazy to be talking about these invisible things. Right? No, what I'm saying is you'll be able to feel it. You can feel it. Oh, now I'm going to feel this invisible thing? Yes, I know it sounds nuts, but believe me, it's there. And believe me, anyone can do this. Right? So this is what we're doing. We're helping people to distinguish what's already there, what they have available to them.
And I think one of the things that I find when I'm talking to organizations, which is a bit like a sort of light bulb moment, and you mentioned it earlier, where organizations are like, yeah, okay, we need to be more strategic. We need to be more innovative. We need to be more creative. Right. So we're going to put ourselves in a boardroom for the next 3 hours and we're going to brainstorm.
Oh, yes.
Brainstorm. And we're not allowed to leave this room until we've come up with some innovative and creative ideas to build market share and attract more companies or customers or develop a new brand. And then you kind of go, okay, so you were loggering away, you were banging heads for 3 hours. Did you come up with any ideas? No. What happened when you took a break? What happened when you went and made a cup of tea or just took a natural break and, got a glass of water? Oh, I got the best idea. And it's like, what do you make of that? When it goes back to what you were saying, we're so in the doing, and we're not saying that we shouldn't do stuff, but it's that old paradigm that actually so much of what we're trying to do to get an outcome is working in opposition to these amazing forces that are available to us in the form of that infinite intelligence and wisdom. And it's so exciting to help organizations take them on that journey, whether it's the organization or it's a marketing team or a sales team. Go, you've got the best, forget AI, you've got infinite intelligence. It's here.
Yeah.
And when we let things just settle, that's when we get our best ideas.
That's a great practical. Many of the teams I work with, where it's in team coaching, the coaching is all in this sort of understanding. Now, the teams I work with, they're practically focused on something. So they're focused on, we need to have our priorities for next year. So we'd like you to come in and that. So first of all, I clear up, I am not a facilitator. I'm not going to facilitate you through a process. I will coach your team to accomplish what your objective is. And in my coaching of the team, what I'm drawing attention to are things like what you pointed to. So I'll draw attention to things like, let's time out for 1 second here. What's the atmosphere like in this room? What's the feeling like in this room? Check in. What's it feel like here? What's it? And we'll check in, we'll look at that. And then I'll say, so people will say, well, I don't know, it's feeling a little bit like tense. I'm feeling kind of pressured. I'm noticing a lot of defensiveness, right? So they check in, they look, they notice. And then I'll ask the question. I said, if we continue this conversation, what ideas, what do you think the quality of the ideas and the quality of the collaboration are going to be? The time spent, how well spent do you think it is? The output that comes out, how useful do you think it'll be? And so there's a little bit of this that goes on to the point of a lot of these teams eventually begin to realize we have to pay more attention to this. We have to pay more attention to this than we're paying attention to. So in other words, if we are not paying attention to this, we could spend a whole day or a half day in a meeting and end up with nothing in terms of output that's useful. If we can do something about this, we get better quality output. So literally, you could end up in fewer meetings. You could end up in shorter meetings. Your output could be stronger. The whole thing is more productive. But your access to productivity, where do most of them go? We need an agenda. We need a decision-making. We need a decision-making process. Our meetings suck. No, your meetings suck because you don't understand the atmosphere in the meeting. You have a group of beings there, and you have an energy and a feeling, and it is not conducive to your thinking. It does not allow your potential, and you don't even notice it. And all you want to do is keep working and working and doing, and you don't realize how stupid the output is that's coming out of this meeting. It is wasting everyone's time, and you don't even notice. That is non-productive. And that's the kind of difference it makes when you wake up to what is there, glaring and in front of you. It's right in front of you. It's happening right there. Do not overlook it. You've got to pay attention to what's there, and it's obvious. And if I asked anyone in the room just a few questions, every one of them would be present to what's going on, and none of them know what to do about it. Wouldn't that be useful? Wouldn't that be useful if everyone was aware and could do something about it instead of continuing on with this nonsense? So that's kind of what my team coaching does more of, is helping teams move in that direction so that they don't need me. They don't need me to coach them. They wake up to what they see and what they know. And I don't even train them. I don't even train them in what to do, because once they see what's going on, everyone knows it's common sense to know what to do. So it's common sense. You just need to see it. When you can't see it, there's no common sense.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that, because I think about the times that I spent in strategic HR away days where I was probably just rolling my eyes for a lot of it, for all the reasons that you were saying. It's like, okay, how can we be more strategic? And we've got the agenda, and we're doing this, and we're going to do a bit of team building, and we're going to do, and it's just like, and actually what I also love about what you said, Dominic, is one of the things that I hear from employees and leaders is how much of their time is sucked, especially in this new hybrid working world or working from home. They're just on meeting to meeting to meeting. And the vast majority of people come out of the meeting and they're like, I don't even know why we had the meeting. Like, there was no clarity what we were trying to achieve. People were like fatigued. They haven't even got their camera on because everybody's just like, can't be doing with this, can't be doing with this. And everything that you said, it's like the whole premise of what we're talking about in this context of spirituality and business is designed. Well, it's not designed. It is about creating better output, more strategy, more innovative thinking, better productivity, all of that, but pointing people in the right direction from where they've been looking. Yeah.
Great recap. You know, we got to the end of this, and I'm not sure I would even use, I'm still not convinced I'd ever use the word spirituality. If it's appropriate in an organization, I might, but it is totally unnecessary. It's a label anyway. What we're pointing to, everyone knows about. And I'll continue to look for more and more ways of pointing to it. But unless, I'll ask them what it is. So, when they speak to values, when they speak to mission, when they speak to a purpose, what is that they're talking about? What are they talking about? And whatever they're talking about, I'll use that language, because I don't want my language to distract. Because what I'm pointing to is what they know. What I'm pointing to is in their experience. And when I use a label that works for me, I don't want it distracting them. And so that's why I rarely with teams, because rarely have I had a team that speaks in that language. So I never speak in that language. I just ask them. I point to something and I ask them, what do you call that? Right? And they'll say something like, the vibe is low in this room. They'll just use whatever language, and I'll ask them, okay, well, if that's what you want to call it, does everyone understand what that means? And they all nod their heads. Oh yeah, I get what that means. Okay, good. Well, then let's talk about that. And so, what about the vibe in the room? How many people are noticing it? What's like? So I'll just kind of like use their own language. So.
Oh, absolutely. And it kind of goes back to where we started, really, that organizations are already using this language like creation, innovation, vibe, connection.
Yes.
I think I've seen HR people now call themselves chief heart officers.
Oh, nice.
That's a new one.
Nice.
So they're already using this language. They're just not necessarily using it in the context of spirituality. I just chose to call it spirituality in business because I knew that would get people's attention, because they'd be like,
it will.
What's she doing?
I love it. Yeah. No, I love it. It's going to be, it definitely will get attention. And I think that's excellent. And then they'll realize that they know what we're pointing to. They've been doing it for a while, and they've known there's something there. And that's what we want to work with them on, is that part that they know that's been hard to get at. It's kind of, I think the thing about you and I is it's, and this may be hard for some to accept, but we've come to the understanding that's the only thing worth talking about. And I know that even as I said that, people will listen on this and they'll say, oh my God, he's so naive. It's like, he's so naive. He's so naive to think that this is the only thing worth talking about. And what I'm saying is, it's the only thing worth talking about. Because everything else that they talk about, when it comes to competencies and when it comes to all that other stuff that they talk about, is after the fact. It is created. All of that stuff is creation and manifestation of what we're talking about. So you can create all of that stuff. By the way, it's good. It's useful. It kind of can align people and be clear about what they're saying. But you don't need, here's what I'm clear about. You don't need me to talk about that. Like, you don't need me to help you with that. That's not the thing that I can help you with. So you can do that yourself. But what I can help you is the only thing worth talking about. And once you get that, then you don't need me. So once you get that, once you see that part of connection, you won't need me. And that's sort of my purpose as a coach. Is it's interesting, because recently what I've been saying to people in my personal, my individual one-to-one coaching with executives, how they all do like a coach interview. They usually talk to several and then they pick one. So in my coach interviews recently, I said, because it's become clear to me, I say, well, we're going to work together for 6 months. And I have only one purpose. Like, I'm interested in your objective and what you want to do. And obviously that part is important. But I have only one purpose in this coaching that we have together. And that is to introduce you to your real coach. So throughout our entire coaching, I will be continually introducing you to your real coach. And your real coach is with you 24/7. And your real coach is far more intelligent than I am. And your real coach knows precisely how to guide you in all of these. So you and I can work together. We will look at what your challenges are, but rather than me partnering with you to solve your challenges, what I'm going to do is be looking to your real coach. And through that, the value to you is, as I know the real coach is there, and we're going to look to the real coach to see the guidance that's being provided to you. By the time the 6 months are up, what you're going to realize is, what do I need this guy for? I have a real coach, and my coach is 24/7. This guy I only talk to twice a month. He's not even there when I actually need him in the meetings. What kind of a coach is that? And so this is kind of directionally how I'm going, even in my individual coaching. So yeah.
I love that. And it reminds me, I was coaching a director this morning, actually, and it points to exactly that. We were talking about decision making. And he said, he works for an investment bankers. And he said, I can look at client portfolios and I can make a decision just like that, whether to go with, say, Unilever or Diageo. I said, okay, talk me through that decision-making process. And he said, well, yeah, I will look at some data, but I'll just know which is the best for my client to invest in. I was like, well, what do you base that on? He went, instinct. I was like that, my friend, that is your innate wisdom. And in that moment, you trust that innate wisdom. You don't question it. You're not back in your head going, I don't know, I'm not sure. I said, you have learned what your innate wisdom is, what that intelligence is that's speaking to you through that instinct. And he kind of made me laugh because he's like, yeah, I know, but in other situations, I can't decide whether to have Italian or Thai. And it's all of that, exactly as you said, that muddy thinking, all of those grains of sand swirling around and around and around, or the analogy that I often use is one of a snow globe. You've just got so much going on in your head that you can't access that innate wisdom. And so, like you, it's pointing people to that wisdom and intelligence that's always there guiding them until we are no longer needed. Our services are no longer needed, and we take flight and we move on to the next person. But I think that's a beautiful place to stop. I could continue to talk to you for hours and hours and hours, Dominic. I really could. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for such a insightful and fun and connected conversation. And if there is anybody that's listening that's thinking, I'd like this guy, I want this guy into our sales teams or into exec coaching, what's the best way of reaching you, Dominic?
If you go to my website that has my name, dominicscaffidi.com. So mostly that is, personal to this, right? However, there's a link at the top that will say corporate executive, and it will connect you to my corporate website, which is HR Possibilities Inc. But it might be easier to just go to my name.
I'll include it in the show notes.
Yeah. And the HR Possibilities would be the corporate one, and Dominic Scaffidi is more personal. Individuals tend to go there. So, yeah.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for the work that you are doing, taking this inner wisdom into organizations. And I will look to continuing to connect with you, I'm sure, in the future, Dominic.
Thank you. This is a great idea for a series and for a podcast and to explore. Thank you. It's brilliant. All right.
Well, thank you all for listening. We trust that this has given you food for thought, and we look forward to connecting with you again on the next episode. Bye-bye for now.